This is the third semester that we've been doing these talks, and Kerf is fantastically happy to be partnering with MindCORE. So I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves very quickly before we hand it over to Dr. Johnson.
Thanks, Anne. I think this is our fourth. I think we started in the January.
Lost all meaning. Yeah.
I'm Heather Calvert. I'm the executive director for MindCORE, and MindCORE is a center for mind and brain within the University of Pennsylvania. That's all. That's all we have to do.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So normally, when we have a speaker, there's a sort of an obligation to give a long and storied introduction. But the point here is that Dr. Johnson's going to tell us her own story. So rather than sort of front loading with a bunch of titles and achievements, I am simply going to be quiet and hand the floor over.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Heather and Anne, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. So I was telling Heather, I'm not sure if I know what I said the last time, but I'm gonna just speak. It might come out a lot differently this time around. So I wanted to divide my life up into kind of sectors. And I think the first sector I'll start with is pre-America era, because I did think that shaped a little bit of my thinking about education and the need for it. So I was born in Jamaica, in Kingston, Jamaica. Both my parents, my entire family, my siblings were born there. My mom decided to come to the United States and emigrate here in 1980. But before then, I was kind of raised in I would say, a middle-class Jamaican family with a little bit of skirting poverty along the way. I have 8 siblings. I am number 5 of 8. And that makes for, some challenging growing up times. My mom was a registered nurse. The term is registered nurse here, but in Jamaica, she was a nurse. And my dad was a civil servant. So from I was really small, my entire family are filled with nurses and educators, teachers. And because there were so many of us, and one of my dad's sister was a kindergarten teacher, at like 2 and 3, he just like put us all in the kindergarten class. So we started learning and learning very quickly because we were being babysat by a kindergarten teacher, we were learning very quickly our ABCs. And so that actually led to an accelerated pace in terms of education. And my mom was super passionate about being the best of the best. In Jamaica, just so a little bit of insight, there is a common entrance system that you have to take after elementary school that determines where you go for high school. That's very different from the United States. I guess it's kind of like the SAT in some sense, but we were such a large family that my mom always said that I don't think you all can go to college because I don't have the monies to be able to send you all to college. But if you can, get your education, get to like one of those top high schools, maybe a fellowship or a scholarship like that might determine your ability to get to school. So that actually was kind of a big motivation. So when we were 7 and 8, we had to take the exam at 10. My mom would start doing extra calculus exam, not calculus, but like algebra and all these things that you needed to do. I love that because it left such an impression in my head. I remember my approach to math was, I was excited. I was like, when my brother was taking the exam and my sister was taking the exam and my mom went through the same process. Remember, I'm number 5 and I'm like, when is my turn? When is my turn? I wanna do these math exams as well. And I remember that's a salient memory for me because I really started going, I love math. I wanted to spend that time with my mom, but it was also this excitement about education. And that excitement permeated. I did really well, went off to high school, 7th grade at 10, which again, the slightly acceleration part of things. And when we came to the United States, and lots of that's for political reasons or for other, our entire family moved to New York City at the same time. And I had just finished the 7th grade there at one of the top high schools in Jamaica. And I did not want to come. A lot of people go, everybody wants to come to the United States, not. I was 12. I had just started, getting to know people and feeling myself as a 12-year-old. And my mom was like, well, we're going to the United States. I'm like, no. And I was disappointed. I was didn't know what to expect. So we get to the United States, we get to New York City. My grandmother was the matriarch of the family. She had already been in the United States since the 50s. She had left left Jamaica, and her story is actually quite unique. She was a designer of wedding dresses, really talented. And someone in America saw her wedding, her designs, and really asked her if she wanted to come to the United States. And that's actually how she got to the United States in the 50s. And her experience as a designer and her being such a, like a va-va-va-boom type person, she actually stayed in America, became a citizen. And she was the reason why my entire family then came to the United States. So fast forward, being in junior high school in New York City, I went to John Philip Sousa High School in the Bronx. And imagine, if you will, a 12-year-old coming here, starting high school, heavy Jamaican accent. Experiencing a little what I thought, I didn't know what it meant to be Black in America, and I actually thought that it was similar to being Black in Jamaica. And I thought I was going to instantly make friends and, that it was going to be really easy. 3 things happened during junior high that actually stunted my growth a little. One was recognizing that in 1980, before it became really popular to be Jamaican, people didn't think Jamaican was cool. So I got name called, I got bullied a lot. It was me, I called myself very, very much into education, but school became scary because it no longer felt like a protected place. And I remember saying to myself, what is going on here? I thought I was going to come and bond with all these Black Americans and that we were going to be on Kumbaya territory. And that was not the case. And because I was being bullied, I really kind of moved a little bit into my shell. And then another challenge was, people just assume that if you're not educated in the United States and you come to America, that you're stupid or something. But in fact, my experience was more accelerated. So I was like bored because I was already doing or had already done everything they had done in the 8th grade before I got here. So again, it's struggling. And I think the reason why I say those are salient things, because I think they could have derailed me. They could have become derailing in terms of being bullied. Sometimes we react by going to ourselves, being bored, you might go, get into some other stuff. But I'm so glad for my mom and my grandmother. They kept on saying, come to America. We came to America so that you can get to college. And that the way to out of poverty, because our whole economic situation changed when we came to America. We were living in the projects in New York City, all 10 of us. And it was also, family life was a bit chaotic. And my mom kept on saying, look, the way out of poverty is education. And she drilled that. The way out of poverty is education. And that it's no, it's really true that all of you can go to college because this is what America is famous for. There's the opportunity for everyone to be able to achieve the American dream. And my mom actually said that. She said, don't get it twisted. You came here to, get to college and to be able to do that. But long story short, it didn't derail me. I was able to rise to the top of the junior high school class and actually became their valedictorian, which my mom was super proud. And then I went off to high school, Bronx High School of Science. The same thing that was driving me, education, trying to make sure that I, achieved was always salient there, and including all my siblings. My older sibling, my brother was in City College. My sister went off to Cornell University. And so there was this sense of, okay, it's possible. But what's interesting is that we knew nothing really about the college system. I didn't know what Penn was. I didn't know what it meant to be an Ivy League. I didn't know what it meant to be, everyone's talking about HBCUs historically, but I didn't know what that was. I didn't know the system, and neither did my mom. My mom was just, how do we get there? How do we pay for it? How? And I would worry and I would say, I don't know. I want to go to college, Mom. I don't know what's going on. And she was saying, don't worry about it. Your job is to get A's, and my job is to figure out how to get you to college. So those things I tell that because it really freed me as a young child to just worry about school, right? To not worry about the finances, to just worry about school. And that was actually a good thing because being that we were, from such a large family, and my dad did not come to the America with us. My mom and my dad separated. So it was just my mom alone on our registered nurse salary. So we were able to take advantage of financial aid. And that actually was a saving grace in terms of being able to get to college. And Penn gave a really great package. I want to tell the story of how I got to Penn because I think that makes a difference, or how I even started thinking about engineering. So all through high school, things were relatively easy. I continued to be a good student, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I was really good at math and science, and I flirted with the idea of being a doctor. And because my mom was a nurse, she was like, none of you can be nurses. My mom was against anyone being a nurse because she was saying, be the doctor. The nurses do the work and get the crap on, and the doctors take all the accolades. So she forbade us from even considering nursing. So I was flirting with the idea of medicine, but I really liked math and science. And I had a really nice counselor in high school. And I remember her because it was a turning point in my trajectory of thinking what was possible. So she said, well, have you considered engineering? And I was like, what's engineering? And she was like, well, and she also mentioned bioengineering. She said, well, bioengineering will put the math and the science together in kind of innovative ways. And you should consider that because maybe they'll merge together. And so me being an overachiever, I looked up, okay, well, where are all the bioengineering programs in the country? Penn, RPI, Brown. And so I was like, okay, well, Penn is number one in bioengineering, I'm going there. So I applied, I got in. And, I thought about going to Brown. I thought about going to RPI. I went and visited Brown. I had to take off because they said, oh, they didn't keep track of your grades. I was like, what? I'm such a type A person. I'm like, I need to know whether I got an A, a B, or a C. This pass-fail nonsense, no way. So Brown was off the table, and it was too cold in upstate New York to go to RPI. So I ended up at Penn. Penn was an interesting journey for me. One is by then we were comfortable. We were still kind of, flirting on the lower part of the middle class, and coming to Penn was a bit of a shock in a sense of mingling with with so many people that had lots of wealth as well. And I remember people having discussions about what they got for graduation from high school. And I remember someone saying, "Oh yeah, my family gave me a car." And I was joking to my friend, I'm like, "Well, my mom gave me a car, duh." And that was my graduation present. But it was a little bit of a shock to kind of come in and socialize in the Penn atmosphere. It made me a little bit shaky and like thinking, who are these people? Can I hang? That's not me. I can't afford this lifestyle. I had to do work study, and just the process of kind of trying to deal with the fact that there were people who lived these different lifestyles. And I was actually, and there were lots of very wealthy Black people, very wealthy white, very wealthy Asian. But there were a few people like myself that came from New York, from modest backgrounds. But those things did leave an impression. And I remember feeling a little bit, unsure. And even though I came from a really great high school, I still think economics as well as color started making me wonder, And then when I got to Penn in my math class and in my physics class, I won't forget this because this was another possible turning point. I remember the professor in the physics class, I think he had some, put it this way, I think he was racist. I remember him picking on me, and whenever I, raised my hand or tried to ask questions, just felt like I could never answer anything right. And, physics is important, as in like one of those key classes. And I tell that story because when I started asking about, this professor, a lot of people said, yeah, he's pretty hard. He doesn't believe that Black people should be X, Y, and Z. And that was discouraging because it's like, that was for me, maybe the first time that I had someone blatantly come against me in terms of assuming that I was not able to do the work. And I found that to be something that I experienced this was the 80s, guys. There was an Office of Diversity, Miss Ingram, Cora Ingram. She became my home away from home. I wanted just to remind you that because I was accelerated, I came to Penn at 16. So I was really super young. I didn't know anything. I was, maybe mentally advanced, but I wasn't emotionally as advanced as I could have been. And I remember struggling a bit out of my element with the students that seemed to kind of be more worldly and kind of got it going on. And even though I was from New York, and New York is a big teeming city, I had never been faced with someone going, you can't, right? Remember, I was kind of raised, you can do whatever. That's how my mom raised me. And even though people bullied me, it wasn't because, oh, you're stupid, but it was like, you can't, right? It was for different reasons. So that was like, it shook me to the core. And then in engineering, I had a lot of people who didn't want to work with me. There were like 2 or 3 of us in mechanical engineering. Actually, remember I told you I came into bio? Well, when I got to bio, I hated it. And I switched to mechanical engineer because I liked building things a little bit more. So then now I'm in mechanical engineering, and there were not many students of color, and we were kind of, trying to support each other. But I remember saliently people not wanting to work with us, people making assumptions about us, other students, who made us feel like we don't belong, that we were taking advantage of affirmative action. They didn't know anything about us, anything about how, we were educated or anything, but again, making these assumptions that kind of serve to, batter your core, and batter your confidence and your self-confidence. And what I really loved about Miss Cora Ingram, who at the time was the diversity and inclusion person, I made her office my haven. You know, I'd go there, and when something challenging occurred, and I was made to feel like, why am I here? What, you know, she always reminded me of what I was worth. She reminded me to not quit. She reminded me that I could do this, that Penn was survivable, and that that I could survive Penn academically. And that before I came here, I knew who I was. Why are you letting the people at Penn determine where you're going to go? And so that actually allowed me to survive Penn as an engineer, or else I would have probably quit and dropped out of engineering a long time ago. So that makes that was actually an important piece, because it also turned me a little bit against engineering. You know, when I finished, I was so exhausted that I was like, I don't know if I wanted to be in engineering anymore. And I flirted with the idea of law school, but I kept on saying, well, you know, I spent all this time trying to learn engineering. Why don't I go and be an engineer? So there was nothing in my thoughts about being a professor, guys. I mean, some people are like, oh yeah, I've always known I wanted to be a professor. Nah, not me. Not me at all. There was no thought about that coming out of college. It was like, I'm tired. I'm poor. I need to pay for my student loans. Those were the only things that were on my mind. And I felt like I had just came out of a battle, you know? So it was like, no way I'm going to stay in this battle and go any further. I also realized one important thing is that I didn't know that that people paid you to do your PhD. I didn't know that. If I had known that, would I have stayed? Nah. Nah, I would not have stayed, because again, I was exhausted. I was tired. I was feeling like I had just run a marathon at Penn and I needed to rest. So I spent 2 years working as a process engineer for Westinghouse. And that actually was good. It made me gain a bit of confidence in myself as an engineer. I saw a little bit of the world. My first assignment was in Maryland, in Chesapeake Bay area. Then I went to, they transferred me to California. That's actually how I got to California, Sylmar, California, working on a plant there. And then the first big collapse of Wall Street in my lifetime occurred due to the whole junk bond era. And Westinghouse as a company was quite affected. And I remember being in California, remember my family's in New York, and I'm like, oh no, what am I gonna do? That became another turning point. The plant that I was working in, they were gonna close down. They offered me the opportunity to continue to work and come back to South Carolina. And then at the time I realized I am bored. You know, this is not challenging. This is not interesting enough. I feel like I've learned a lot of this stuff. I don't want to go to South Carolina and be a process engineer. So I started applying to the master's program. I talked to Miss Ingram, who again was like my surrogate mom, you know, at Penn. Called her up and I said, hey, Miss Ingram, what do you think? You know, should I go to a master's program? I started flirting with the PhD, but I was kind of really flirting with the higher learning part, because I realized how quickly I'd gotten bored. And I realized I liked learning. So now it's almost like 2 years of resting, and all of a sudden I could see the higher level education possibilities. And I made a decision. I was going to say, I applied to a master's only program at Columbia, only applied to 2 places, and a master's PhD program at University of California, Irvine. And I said, well, I'll see which one. I got into both, and now it was like, go back home to New York and go get a master's, or go to stay in California and do the PhD, a master's PhD. And it was robotics. And that actually was my going, oh, I really actually, both programs were in robotics. And I was like, oh, the master's PhD program was a good opportunity, because the person who was going to be my advisor was a a Black professor who came out of his PhD was at Penn. So he graduated from Penn. I knew him when he was a PhD student. Miss Ingram said, Greg would take care of you. He'd really be a great mentor. And how rare it is for me to have a Black professor who's going to be advisor. So that was actually something that I looked forward to. I went to UC Irvine, and another turning point occurred there. So I was doing robotics, and I was actually really getting into the robotics and really enjoying it. But I was doing force control, and Greg was into space and all kinds of other robotics. And I wasn't really thrilled about where that trajectory was going. Another personal thing happened is my grandmother had a stroke. And remember the grandmother who was the dress designer that I looked up to, that was the matriarch of the family who brought us over here. Her getting a stroke and really moved into this place of disability really changed how I saw disability. And I was like, whoa. And then there was a student who was in the same lab. He told me he was working on a robot for a wheelchair for people with spinal cord injury. And I was like, what? You know, that blew my mind. I was like, whoa, robots can work with people, like people with disability. And it was, I would say that was a eureka moment for me, because it really made me go, oh, robots, people, disability, grandma. And all of a sudden I felt like I was connecting the dots in my mind. And I went to Greg, and who was my Dr. Long, my faculty advisor. And I said, can you tell me more about this idea of rehabilitation robotics? And he was like, that's a nascent field. Not a lot of people are doing anything in that. But they're having a conference. And I looked that up, and I said, would you mind paying for me to go? And this is an instant of where I was grateful for being supported, because that was kind of moving away from where he was interested in, but he still supported me to go to the conference. And I really appreciate that, because it was at that conference that I met my future PhD advisor, Dr. Leifer, who ran one of the few rehab robotics lab in the early 90s. And I talked to him there. The conference blew my mind. I was like, this is what I want to do. If I'm going to get a PhD, I'm going to get a PhD doing this. All of a sudden, click, click. It was like, okay, now I know where I would put my energy. And I got a GEM fellowship. I was able to then transfer to Stanford. And from the beginning, it was exciting. I was excited about doing and learning about robotics and applying it to people with disability. And that actually is the beginning of this trajectory, right? I could say that Stanford was a cakewalk. It wasn't. I had some struggles at Stanford. You always doubt, am I on the right path? Am I, doing this? And so there were some opportunities to reevaluate, but I kept with it. And one of the proudest moments for me, my mom, my family, was graduating with the PhD. And this is a shocking little tidbit, but when I graduated with the PhD in mechanical engineering, someone told me, do you know that you're the second Black woman from Stanford to graduate at MU with her PhD? I'm like, you're kidding. That was shocking to me, because I was like, what? This is 2000, this shouldn't have been, this is 2000, what's going on? Anyway, that was a proud moment. I dedicated my thesis to my grandmother. When I was done, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had imposter syndrome. I don't know if many of you are aware of what that is. I kept on thinking, do I really belong in this room? Am I really Dr. Johnson? That was something that was internal struggle as to whether I was prepared to become a professor. And I also remember thinking, I don't know if I want to be a professor at a place like Stanford. I was thinking that I didn't want to do 100% research. I loved teaching. I loved mentorship. I love these other things. But at the same time, I'm sitting here at Stanford and this is mainly a research one place. And I was looking around and I wasn't sure. So it wasn't a clear-cut decision to go into the professorate because it was, is this what I really want to do? Do I want to live my life like my advisor did? Another turning point was there was a professor, Dr. Rick Reese, who wrote this book called Tomorrow's Professor. And it was about engineers and engineering with PhD and the things that they can do and the diversity of things that they can do. And one of the things he said was in the book was that America produced or had maybe 300 or so, there's maybe more now, PhD granting institutions for engineers. However, there were thousands of different types of places that PhDs in engineering could work. And it was the first time that I understood about the professorate, where it says, well, you could just teach on the college level, you could teach a master's level program, you could do a research 1 and a research 2. I never really had thought about those rankings until that time. That actually was quite freeing to me because all of a sudden I realized I didn't have to end up at a Stanford. I could do a San Jose State where the formula of awarding teaching and research was different from what they would do at a Stanford. But I still felt like, I don't know if I could be a professor. So I needed to take a break. So people were like, well, back then, a lot of people didn't do postdocs, a lot of engineers didn't do postdocs, but I said, I'm going to do a postdoc. I applied for a fellowship. I was fascinated with the work that was happening in Europe. And I was able to get to Europe, and I was able to win a fellowship in an Italian lab in the Biorobotics Institute at the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. And that really helped me to solidify that, yes, I wanted to do this. Yes, research should be a big part of what I want to do. And yes, I think that after that, I could come back to the United States and enter the professorate. And that's what I did. The 2 years in Italy was really growing in many ways, personally, as well as intellectually, as well as one of the things that it did was it exposed me to the global space of robotics. And I think that's what made me a little bit different, maybe from the average rehab robotics person, is because I kind of learned to be beyond the US. And it really made me think about the world and how do we make a difference worldwide. And so now my research is, has still rehab, still robotics, still thinking about people with disability, but I feel like my global perspective really began when I, did my postdoc in Italy. So how did I end up at Penn? I spent 10 years being a professor at Marquette in the Medical College of Wisconsin. My chair there was moving to Penn. Penn was still my alma mater. And I told him, hey, I wouldn't mind moving closer to home. So the opportunity came, and that's how I got here. I'm gonna stop there. I won't bore you guys anymore, but lots of lessons. I don't know if I told you them all, but those were key. Did I ever get over my imposter syndrome? That might be a lingering question. I would say I have gotten the better of it in that I feel less like I don't belong and more like I do belong. So, so I would say, I don't know if you ever get rid of it just because of the society and what's going on, and that people still, when I walk in the room, sometimes people are looking behind me for Dr. Johnson and not assuming that I'm the Black woman that just walked in the room is the person that's coming to give the talk. So those things remind you that, not everyone thinks that you belong there. But I would say, for the most part, I I know that I belong, and and that I am less likely to feel like I don't belong. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for sharing. And I think Heather will nod along with me when I say, yeah, just as good as the first time around. So before I start asking the millions of questions that I have, I want to take a pause and see if anybody wants to just, I think we're small enough, you can just unmute yourself and I can, referee if two people start talking over each other, but feel free to just mute and talk or drop something in the chat.
Ask, do you feel that you will continue in the same trajectory for the rest of your career? Like, do you think that this is your mission kind of that you want to research?
Yes, I think my trajectory will evolve. I think the things that I love to research are germane to what my lab is doing right now. I think it transforms, and as new things come along, they come alongside the core. But I think my research core will still be the same. I still have a dream of equitable robotics, affordable robot systems that could be used anywhere in the world by any types of people, no matter what their economics are. And that drives some of my thinking and what I try to instill in my students about, their passion for research and design and, and technology and people with disabilities. So I feel like I'm circling around of the things that I really enjoy. I have a dream though of of possibly doing more, making kind of seeing this vision where maybe I am working with people all over the world right now I'm kind of doing that a little, have some projects in Botswana and other places in the world, but I want to see that grow. So I'm circling around what I find satisfying, but I am not going to close myself off, Julie, to possibilities of new things. I'm always open to, Penn is a great place in terms of collaborators and finding people doing really interesting things. So in fact, when I got to Penn, I wasn't doing anything with infants, and my collaboration with one of the researcher who is at CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, led to a grant and a research direction that I love right now is using technology and machine learning to try to determine motor delays in infants 0 to 6 months. That wasn't kind of on my radar before, but I love the fact that because I was open to the collaborative opportunities at Penn, I ended up learning about that area, pulling that area into my lab and loving that, that research as well. So while I'm in the zone, I'm still open to opportunities and new things, that may come along.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi. Do you feel like you have the space for all the mentoring and teaching that you want to do with the kind of research intensive tradition at Penn, I guess?
I had several of my students are on. I think I juggle. I think I do a good job of making time for my PhD students and the lab in general. I would love to do more, but it is a juggle because you got to juggle the teaching, you got to juggle the research, and you got to juggle the service and all the other things that they judge you on. I feel like I do more than some people. And that because I'm passionate and making sure that undergraduates and graduate students have the opportunity to see someone like myself, and I can influence them in a variety of ways, or they can, come into my lab and get the confidence they need or the experience. I make the time. And so it's a little bit of a struggle, but I feel that it's a priority to make the time to create the spaces for students to experience what I have to give or what the lab has to give. And I hope that in doing so, I influence the next generation. And that's definitely one reason why I chose the professorate, because I feel like it's not just impacting the research, but it's impacting the students who will then go on to do more research or to have those kind of mindsets of thinking globally and thinking how can my technology or the things that I do make a difference, and I feel like that's what I bring to the table. So it's important for me to stay connected to students and to the next generation in some way.
Maybe staying on the theme of mentorship, I will just say I had the great privilege of very briefly knowing Miss Cora Ingram, and I put in the chat, she was a singular individual. But do you talked about your high school counselor and Miss Cora, and what I felt like was left out or surprising to me is you didn't have any sort of professoriate mentors. You didn't have like an academic person. Can you talk a little bit more about
Okay.
sort of accidental how you found your mentors? Did you purposefully like not talk to those people because you didn't see yourself doing that? Like, what was going on there?
Great question. I did not know the process at UPenn. I didn't know that process. I didn't understand, because the PhD wasn't even in my radar. I know, I remember Dr. Kumar. I mean, he was a young assistant professor, I think, when I started. And I remember different faculty. I remember that they were PhD students, but I was struggling so much to be and to stay that I think I wasn't consumed, or I didn't feel the luxury of getting into a professor's lab. Now I take the time to tell young students of these opportunities, because I remember I didn't even know about them, to be honest. And it's not that Miss Ingram didn't say, I don't know, maybe my bandwidth was there somewhere else. Maybe survival was probably more on my radar. I can't say what exactly happened in the undergraduate space. Where my mentorship, once I got to the master's degree, I did have lots of great mentors. Dr. Long, then my mentors in the PhD program, I got exposed to all these really cool researchers who I admired, but it took till then for me. Is it because I didn't want to? No, I think I just I either wasn't aware, or just kind of didn't have the bandwidth, at that point in time. It's strange, but what that tells you is that it's a good thing if you're more aware when you're younger of like where your trajectory is, but it doesn't mean you can't still end up there. It doesn't mean that if you kind of miss it a little in undergrad that you can't come back and circle back around and get it a little bit later. And so I feel like my story was definitely not a straight line, to the professorate. It was definitely not a straight line. And so when I mentor students, I'm real. I'm like, oh, so you don't want to, okay, well, you'll either find your way back or, but I feel like the reality is it may not be a straight line for everyone, and that's okay. In my case, it wasn't on the radar, but it came on the radar later. And once I got that eureka moment, I stayed with it, even though sometimes I felt like I was waffling. But for me, it took a eureka moment. It took a passion space. It took me discovering that space to stay with it. Because I think if I didn't know that, I probably wouldn't have stayed with the PhD program.
Hi, great talk.
Sophia.
Now, like when you face moments of microaggression and racism, how do you deal with them?
Great question. Well, we've been facing a lot of that recently, right? And now maybe because I've gained in confidence, I am more vocal about them. And they don't kind of go away. They just may take different forms. I just give an example of sometimes the racism might be just unconscious bias in the whole system. And recently I felt that I was in a situation where I was being a victim of unconscious bias. And I decided to be vocal. And I decided to talk to the head of the organization that where I was applying for the grant, and just talk about why I thought this was a situation of possibly unconscious bias. Whether they agreed with me or not, I don't know. But I felt that it was important to say. Now, it's not always the case where you feel like you have your power and that you could go and do that. When right now, I say there are a couple responses. Don't keep it in, talk to someone about it. If you are being or feeling that either a professor above you or your teacher or someone is maybe either knowingly or creating those microaggressive type situations, I would say a lot of times the first thought is this in my head? Because we doubt, we don't want to accuse anyone of something. But right now, I'm no longer willing to just stay silent and eat the stress of that, because that's stressful. So it's talking to colleagues. I've developed a group of people that I feel safe with, that are of different colors, of male and female, and that I then now kind of talk to them about it, say, what do you think? Was this, do you think that was in my head? And at least get some affirmation, that I'm not thinking about this on my own. And then getting some advice. Well, what would be the best way to deal with? Since I've been at Penn, I've had experience as faculty where I have come up against those things, and I have definitely leveraged mentorship to be able to deal with it. Leveraged also who can I talk to, especially if this is someone that directly impacts whether I succeed or not. That's terrifying to say, oh, well, how do I deal with that? But through mentorship and through informal and formal mentors, I would say that's my primary way of dealing with it, getting some advice. What is the best way? Sometimes you don't just come out and say, you racist, you know what I mean? Because that's not always the best way to handle it, but finding, what can I do? And how do I handle this in a way that still maybe keep my job or still maybe allow me to not eat this stress? And I think surrounding yourself with individuals that can give you good advice on that, I think is the way to go. I also am aware that students, I want to make myself to be someone that a student feels that they can come and talk to me about an experience. And I've had students come to talk to me about feeling sexually harassed or feeling, discriminated against, and then becoming one of the mentors around that student to be able to offer advice in how to deal. Sometimes it's super frustrating. This whole Black Lives Matter movement has been very, very, very tough. But I think with my lab, I've been super open. My lab is a very multicultural lab. And I feel like I have been the type of PI that says, let's talk about it, you know what I mean? And think that allows I hope students to feel like they don't have to bottle it up.
Thank you.
Hi, I had a question. Thank you so much for the talk. Sorry, I can't turn my camera. My internet is quite unstable.
Okay.
Do you still feel some sort of like imposter syndrome? And if you do, then when do you like expect it to stop, or like how? And if you don't, then like when did you stop feeling like that?
So I will burst your bubble for you and says it doesn't ever stop. However, you feel more like you belong. Like I think I don't know if it was Julie. Someone asked me the question before that I feel more like I belong, and my confidence in my abilities have increased. The imposter syndrome, I think, sometimes rears its head when I get into a new situation, and where I see people looking through me and not expecting the person that I am to be the person that I am, right? And that it throws a little bit of doubt, in my head, but I feel like I now know how to come back and go, I've earned this. I didn't get any handouts to get here, and I belong here, and so owning my space and owning my story and owning what I do helps to combat the imposter syndrome. And the reason why it rears its head, I think, is when other people want to push and go, whoa, you shouldn't be here, or they make this, what's the colloquial term? They throw shade. and you're like, okay, you're doubting my expertise, so that's when it tries to come back. But I feel like I'm at a place where it doesn't paralyze me anymore, because I'm more confident. I own what I do, my mistakes, the good things, the bad things. And I feel like I'm kind of honest right now about this is what I am, and I know that my actions have spoken louder than anybody's assumptions about what I should look like, what I should be like, whatever. So that's how I would say I have dealt with the imposter syndrome. And gaining confidence, and also surrounding yourself with other people who believe in you. That had, in the early days when I was suffering from that, it was really choosing to be around people and mentors who believed in me, who reminded me that, hard work pays off and things like that.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I want to be very respectful of Dr. Johnson's time, but I think we probably have time for one more question if anybody wants to jump in.
Is that Brianna?
I was going to say, Brianna, I can't tell if you're having some sort of issue. Your box keeps lighting up. If you can't, we can't hear you. If you want to type something in, maybe we can read it.
There, Brianna, I see a hand up. Is that is that a hand up from Brianna? I don't know. Looks like there's a hand up. Well, I mean, it's.
I don't see a hand up, and then she remuted herself. So that was okay. Maybe that was an accidental signal. Well, if nobody has any last, I think I love so many of the points that you touched on about, that the first encounter of being Black in America being a totally different thing than being Black in Jamaica. I have a Zambia who had struggled with the same thing, and so I've witnessed that with one of my siblings. The idea of coming from a powerful family of educators, and how that influenced your sort of vision on the world, and having all these powerful female role models. I think something you touched on, didn't really sort of talk about explicitly, but being the first person to sort of foray into this academic realm, right? I think a lot of times first generation students have other people sort of view them as having a lot of setbacks or coming with a lot of baggage. And I think you talked very eloquently about the sort of the lack of expectation and how you were just getting educated and loving learning, and how that was very freeing. And I think I love the fact that you realized that you were bored and just like, I'm not doing this anymore. Life is too short, and how much bravery and just real chutzpah that takes. And hoping that our students will embrace their sort of inner burn, right? And not settle. And I think, also the last thing I would touch on is just this, this experience abroad that you have, and having an intercultural lab, but in putting a priority on that from having had this worldly experience. And so I'm wondering maybe if you can just touch on that just a tiny bit about your global perspective and having that be a dream that you want to, expand that part of your research. Do you have plans for pushing that part forward, and what do those look like?
Yeah, no, that's actually a passion space. And for me, I began kind of the global exploration and working with colleagues in Mexico and trying to bring some of my designs and robotics to there. And that led to actually a grant that ended up, now I'm proud to say that the colleague in Mexico started a robotics gym system for persons with disability using technology. That I've also started collaborations when I came to Penn with Botswana. Proud to say that we have a grant. Kevin's my PhD student. He'll be heading to Botswana to do some work there. And he had won an NSF grant to support his work. So I heavily encourage, global opportunities. And I have colleagues in Jamaica. We're trying to expand there with the Penn Global Seminar Group. We started a Engineering 140 class. We were supposed to teach it this spring, but because of COVID, that went away, but we'll teach it in the spring of 22. And it's a class where it's a Penn Global Seminar class where it's done in collaboration with University of West Indies, Mona, and their engineering school there. We take students there. We did it in 2019. Kevin was a TA. It was a wonderful class. We had several students come with us, learn design, thinking through affordability. So yeah, we're in everywhere I'm going, kind of, I vision kind of having, relationships with important colleagues in low and middle income countries as well as high income countries. And that I have a World Health Organization kind of perspective. And desire is to have viable collaborators or be able to support people in who want to bring technology to bear on people with disabilities in low resource settings. And how do we do that? I just started a seminar series called Global Perspectives on Medicine, Rehabilitation, and Robotics. And we are, it's once a month, the third Wednesdays. And what we do is I try to highlight basically work happening across the globe that is dealing with technology rehab and robotics and kind of thinking about an inclusive space. So if any one of you are interested, and I can share the link, we're advertising on the Center for Global Health website about that. Feel free to join any of the next session is February 17th, and the topic is affordable prosthesis. And if anyone's interested in hearing that, they're good discussions, and I feel pretty proud of having started this forum where people can kind of start thinking about global impact of the technology, So yeah, anyway.
Well, I would if you would share that link with me, I would love to promote it through our channels as well. And for anybody who's, interested in maybe a Fulbright or something, like Dr. Johnson mentioned, that's what our center does. So you should come talk to us about that. And then in the meantime,
I have
can't
a
thank you.
too, Anne.
Okay, you have a question for me?
No, I said I have a Fulbright. So,
Oh, you have a yes. Okay.
So I would encourage students getting Fulbrights as well.
Nice.
Great.
Nice. I did know that. So yes. Anyway, I can't thank you enough for prioritizing this conversation and spending this time with us. We can do the little hand claps I like to do in person, like live over the video. Thanks everybody. I will send you off into this lovely evening we're having. It's still light at 4 o'clock. That's got to be a good thing.
That's a good thing. Take care, guys.
Right.
Thank you again.
Bye,
Thank you so
everybody.
much, Dr. Johnson.